Boom. All right. So my name is Jeremy Meiss. I am with Auth0. One of the last times you'll hear me mention that, since we are vendor agnostic, other than wearing the shirt, giving out the t-shirts. By the way, if you haven't got a t-shirt, make sure to grab one before they go. Also, I don't want to take them home. My wife wants them out of my house. So until the next box that gets here next week. So don't tell her. But yeah, so we are a identity access management provider, helping secure infrastructures, whether it be web apps to mobile apps to machine to allowing for single sign-on, federated access across. We're one of the top ones out there doing that. And we can talk more about that if you have questions about how that works and how all of that kind of integrates into different infrastructures. Thus ends the spiel about who we are. So I am the head of community. I run some DevRel programs and community at Auth0, working with a great team of developer evangelists and community managers that are out there working with developers and getting involved in different security things. As there, that is one big nose. So let's go with that, because everybody likes those emojis. That looks just a whole lot better than my big noggin. Data breaches. So as of this would be mid-year, first half of this year, the total number of recorded records lost was over 13 billion records lost since 2013. So we're talking 5 years. Just 13 billion has been lost. That's been what's been reported. Potentially, I'm sure there's a lot more that's out there that's missing or has been snagged that nobody knows.
So I can share some recent stuff. Over the weekend, it was announced healthcare.gov hacked. They said 75,000 was the number. I think there's still some.
Yeah, and it's
dismal. Everybody's affected.
Yep.
Not just Experian or Equifax or whatever. It's like everybody. So yes.
Yes, and so as the little bit here says, only 4% of breaches were actually secure breaches where encryption had been used, and so the stolen data was rendered useless. That's not good. We'll just leave it at that. That number should speak for itself. So passwords themselves are bad. These are some of the most popular passwords that have been used, that have been found in all the different leaks. If your password happens to be on there, please don't raise your hand, but probably change it before I'm done with this talk. My favorite one, I have a couple here. Let me in. It's a really great password. Whatever. Yeah, that's another one. Freedom, and of course I can't help but read that as somebody that probably just finished watching Braveheart and went, "That's going to be my password," and they probably say it as they're typing it in their head. Freedom. Yeah. Whatever, of course, that's another really good one. But my favorite on here is trust no one. They thought they'd be really cool and say no and use the number 1 instead of actually spelling it out. These are some of the most popular passwords that are out there. Again, like I said, if I love you happens to be yours, you might want to change it. One of the best fails of all time was just over a year ago. There was a pull request that was made to the sec list that keeps track of all of these, so that if you're building an application, you can make sure that people don't use them. And it said, please remove my password from the list so hackers won't hack me, and identified that their password was Dolphin and said, please remove it from this list. If you go out to, I have the link there, Daniel Meisler's sec list pull, the 155th pull. You can see the whole chain of conversation is quite humorous. It is actually a troll. Somebody was just out there just messing around. However, it is a fun little read. And the fact is that in today's day and age, I would not be surprised if this were to actually happen, given some of the developers I've seen over the years that use passwords and just put them out there. GitHub, if you aren't spending any time looking at code, GitHub has now introduced a piece that they will go out and if they notice that your access tokens are out there in your code, they're going to remove them, let you know. They found over the years, AWS had a lot of those, people were putting those into their source control, instead of adding them into a .gitignore that could be only on their local machines or in their central environment. They were posting those up there, and it was not uncommon for people to deploy, have their AWS key there, somebody find it, and run up the bill. So it's not uncommon for this crap to happen. If you have a MacBook, the trackpad is really sensitive. So passwords, they're bad. I don't think anybody here disagrees with that. If you do, we can definitely have a conversation over beer or other hard liquor, but passwords are just bad. It's a bad idea. It was great. How many of you here are old enough to remember when you could have like a 1 or 2 character password along with a 1 or 2 character username back in Linux, Unix early days with Sun OS? Yeah, that gone are those days. Those were actually when things were a whole lot simpler than they are now. But yeah, we've tend to use the same passwords. We're creatures of habit, and it's a whole lot easier. We'll go into this a little bit later, but they're just bad. So some of the reasons they're bad, they're costly. They raise your help desk costs. If you have an organization and you start getting breaches, your help desk costs to answer all of those questions are going to go up crazy amounts. You're also going to have tech acquisition costs that it's going to take in order to fix any issues that are out there, become extremely costly. Management and operation costs, you're going to have to spend a whole lot more time, and management's going to have to get involved, and that's never fun. One of the things, goodness gracious. Stop. Oh, well, okay. So breach impact. So just in 2017, there were 2.6 billion records were compromised. However, in just the first half of 2018, 3.35. So law of averages were growing astronomical numbers. It will be interesting to see what the total is for all of 2018. But it's, startling with that number. That means 18.5 million records are breached every day. Every second, 214. Like the numbers just speak for themselves. It's obviously security is a pain with it. The more computing power that we continue to get out there means it's a whole lot easier, as more easy than it used to be. The cost to do it is a whole lot simpler now because our computers now can do it. More people are involved on social media. The easier it is to do social engineering. How many of you guys are on Facebook? So we don't have to shame you, you don't have to raise your hand, but if you're on Facebook and you get those, hey, answer these 20 questions, and people send those around. Like I remember when those first came out like 20 years ago, and it was like, oh, this is really cool, let's do it. Back in MySpace and all those other, all those other things, bulletin boards back in the day. Like it was cool. You could get to know your friends by filling all that out. That's social engineering. And somebody can easily figure out, hey, your first dog was named Fluffy and your kids' birthdays and all these things. That's simple social engineering. And people put so many things out on social media, it's ridiculous. Which means it's a whole lot easier now to hack and hit the breaches. And users will always be the weakest link. Just will. Users are always going to be that. As evidenced by, how many of you remember the, I think it was last year when Hawaii decided to say, hey, the world's ending, and send out the big notification, the world freaks out. One of the pictures they showed was the guy that posed for it. Somebody zoomed in, and on his computer screen was the password for the system. They've since said, oh, by the way, we changed that. That's no longer an issue. But fact remains, he was right. It's exactly what they probably did. Because how many of us back in the day would do that? Well, just add a 1 or add an exclamation mark or whatever to it. Users will always be the weakest link. So usability is another challenge with passwords. 21% of users admit to using the same password for everything. And a lot more people use 2 or 3 across their subset. Efforts to make them more complex have made them extremely unusable. So I did a quick little check. So with LastPass, Password Manager, same thing could be done with Wooden Password and not Bitdefender, but Bitwarden is an open source password manager. You can, and I say you should use password managers if you're going to use a password. You just should. It's a really good idea. It's not the end all be all. 2-factor is a much better way to further secure that. However, creating a long password is great. There's no way you're going to remember that. So then I clicked this nice thing that said, hey, make it pronounceable. Give me a password that's pronounceable. That's the one on the right. And I looked at that and went, I can't even pronounce whatever that is supposed to be. It's trying to make it complex. It's unusable. It's not anything I'm going to remember. How many of you guys have seen this from UK or XKCD? Yeah, it's a great illustration of how we've tried to make passwords over the years. We've said, hey, let's use numbers for letters and mix things around, and it just makes it harder on ourselves and a whole lot easier on systems to crack. And NIST themselves have started to provide some really good password examples and ways to better secure, and they talk about passphrases being something that you should use instead. And there's a fantastic article that if you go out and look, was written about a year ago on NIST's website around that. The short of it is that you want to have passwords that you only will remember, but it's something that nobody would be able to figure out what those words were. It's a fantastic read. And even in this, 4 random common words makes it extremely hard. 550 years at 1,000 guesses a second. Contemporary thinking to get to that. It is difficult to remember, but you've already memorized it. Something you already know. It's referenced to you, not someone else. And we really hate passwords. How many of you love trying to come up with new passwords on a given basis? Whenever you go to sign on, how many of you don't raise your hand? Just decide, you know what, I'm going to use that same password I use over here. We just do because usability ends up being, it's difficult. So we tend to, as human nature, default. There are those that aren't that way, and I try to not, but there are times that I just go, okay, I'm going to go with this one because I'm not really that worried about it, and I come back to it and go, yeah, I need to fix that, and I do.
So I have to work with a system that requires a password change every 90 days, and
Yeah.
remembers the previous 25 used.
Yeah.
And it scrubs for this spec.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it scrubs for commonly used passwords, but I'll just describe the process of having to do this every 90 days. It's soul crushing.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, okay, and I'm a security professional. I do this for a living, and you're like, okay, I gotta find something. It's like 4 random words, and of course, browsers will suggest highly random things that it's stuck in your browser.
Yeah.
You go somewhere. And so, to your point, this is a painful problem. Maybe we can make it go away.
It'd be nice.
Pizza in the back.
Be nice if we could. Why is that popping up? Oh, because Justin's, there we go, it's gone. Justin was watching as he was walking. You didn't see his little noggin. Yes, so it is, it's painful. So what now? What are our options? OAuth is how many of you guys have heard of OAuth? I hope most of you guys, yeah, it's pretty good standard. I'm going to read here kind of how they describe it. It's a protocol allowing a user to grant limited access to a system and to another site without having to expose their credentials, the master credentials. And they describe it as similar to a valet key that you would give to a car, is that you give them when you go to drop your car off, you're at some restaurant, you want to drop it off. That key on high-end vehicles does this to where it will only let that vehicle be driven for about a mile or 2, and then it dies. And so you would hand them that key instead of handing your whole system. That's how they describe what OAuth provides you from a token-based system. And that in itself is a whole nother talk. And we won't go deep into that, but if you want to find more information, if you haven't already read about it, want to know more, OAuth.net/2 gives a great read on what the actual spec is for version 2. Version 1 was good. Version 2 expounds on it and makes it a lot more secure. It gives you different grants and different auth. You can also delegate, obviously, your social things that you're already using, already authenticated with, that are a form of authentication, and so you can utilize that social logins. So yeah, you can use Google, you can use others, you can create. There's also I was at a hackathon a few weeks ago at and the people that were there were actually working on what they call, brain just escaped me, another auth, kind of another delegation that would allow you to use your own personal website as a identifier. They were trying to work on something that would make it an open source way of doing it. That way you wouldn't have to utilize this type of a social logon, but the idea is that you're delegating to something else that you've already, and you're latching on to that security there. There are challenges there, and as you know, you're moving your risk, changing your trust on some of those other services to keep their systems secure, but it is a better way than just using a simple password. And then obviously multi-factor authentication, two-factor MFA. How many use two-factor already in their kind of normal day-to-day authentication systems? Yeah. If you don't, you should, and that would be another one of those takeaways that you have to do before you leave the building is sign up for 2FA on all of your accounts. What's interesting is banks in the US are very slow to adopt 2FA. And in fact, many still send emails with a password in it for you to log in. Others still send an SMS with the password there, which is better than nothing. But some don't even do 2FA, don't even do MFA. And whereas in Europe, it's, especially in the UK, like there is a growing number of people that will not bank somewhere if they don't have 2FA. So it's one area that we as a society here in the US need to adopt. We need to be pushing for our banks to do so and do it right. The other way, we can also just tell passwords to bleepity bleep 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 for the purposes of, being sensitive. I won't use all the words I want to use. So let's forget them. You can build proper strong passwords. Again, NIST kind of talks about some of the ways they do it is using the different passwords, different passphrases, using 2FA. They recommend, like we talked about, building proper strong passwords are, something plus the name of page is one way to do it. You can also do, again, the passphrases is a much better way. Using a password manager, I mentioned, Dashlane, 1Password, LastPass. If you're big in open source, I recommend Bitwarden. It keeps everything local instead of sending it off to some other service. It's a great way to do it. They now are doing it on most, I think it's on most mobile platforms now. And it's a great way to keep your passwords secure, where you use one master password, which would be in theory a passphrase, and then it automatically creates random passwords that you don't even know that you only access with your one main password that's stored locally. So that's the idea there. But 1Password and LastPass are probably the biggest and most, yeah.
So I use LastPass.
Mm-hmm.
You know any conflicts? Because it seems like, it's pretty much free and then well worth having. Do you know any? And they allow you to make it even stronger. They give you the option of how strong you want.
Right. So there's going to be lots of opinions around that. To make it simple without going into a big long discussion, using a, of course, using a service that's not local to yourself. Again, it's just assigning trust. I know LastPass in the past has had some issues. That was 2 years ago or so. But using a password manager is a step above most people. We could go and have a conversation, like I said, deeper about which ones are best, and we could matrix that out and have different varying opinions on that. But I think at least using one, that's a good idea.
Well, I meant for if you need your passwords, keep them sync on the go. You know what I mean? You have to have it somehow.
Yes, it's a good service. 1Password is what we use at my company, and that's just what we've chosen. We feel it's better. It's a better service, but again, the fact using one, if you're on the go, you want to have that across all of your platforms. Using a cloud service is not the. I'll say it. I'm sure there'll be disagree. It's not the worst thing in the world. It just isn't.
I was just wondering if
I'm not aware of any major cons, so I'm sure others might have opinions too, like I said. So, how many of you guys have seen these YubiKeys? Okay, how many have a YubiKey? Okay, how many use a YubiKey on it all the time? Okay, there's a difference between having them and seeing them. I have a couple on my desk, and I just every once in a while look at them and go, "Ooh, I should try and use that." And I do use one on occasion, so it's not just sitting there collecting dust. They are a great way to kind of to work that different kind of 2FA, MFA solution to get rid of a password and make you have to do something else to log in. They come in a variety, like they're getting much more versatile. They have now USB-C options. They have, you can plug them into your phone. There's a variety of ways. The ultimate, and it kind of boils down to it's using WebAuthn, which there's the spec. You can find more information on that, but it's a way that you can, before you log in, instead of getting a text message to a phone or using an app like Google Authenticator or Auth0 Guardian or Authy or any of these other services to get a two-factor password, is that you're doing it on something you plug in and that you control. Same thing, it does boil down to if somebody steals that from you, there's that. It's still, there is a point of failure for a lot of these things, but they are better than passwords. WebAuthn actual spec is very interesting to read. If you haven't, it'd be a good one to read. Detailing very, very, very intricately how they're implementing this. Mac OS is, I believe they've implemented it with Safari or will be soon. They're currently in testing. Actually, of all places, Edge browser was the first to implement WebAuthn of all the browsers out there. They were the first. The Chrome and Firefox were right behind them, but it was quite a surprise to have Microsoft actually, or a Internet Explorer type of browser out there that was actually doing it. And then biometrics, your finger, your eyes, your breath, your spit, any number of those things that can be used to further identify you is a good idea. It's not fail safe. We've seen, as soon as iOS came out with the fingerprint reader and there are ways to hack it, face scan, face unlock, all that stuff. There are ways around it, but again, it is a better solution than using a password. And it can be that other second or third factor authentication that you can use to further identify that that's who you are. And then there's Passwordless, Magic Link. How many of you, when you sign on to, here's some examples, when you sign into Slack or in Medium or in Google and they say, you you don't want to enter in your password, you want to just send me a magic link or send me a one-time, and they send it to you and then you click it and you're instantly logged in. How many of you guys have seen that? Have used it? Yeah. It is, Passwordless is kind of the up and coming kind of alternative to using passwords, utilizing based on you as a person, things that you're authenticating against, and if used in conjunction with 2FA and MFA, can actually be a much better solution. Thing about Passwordless, you can log in without any passwords. It is easy and secure. You can use your email or an SMS to log in. You can also utilize an MFA app like Authy and all those others. The user experience, if you're a developer, user experience can be extremely improved, especially on mobile apps. It's a whole lot easier than having to try and type out a password as you simplify that login experience for a developer. For a user as you, the developer. And it also easily integrates into SSO, single sign-on. Federation across all of the, as a company across all your platforms, you can easily integrate that in, because if you're already logged in on your computer to the main system, then federating that login across identifies who you are. Or if you're logged into, if you're a remote worker like myself and others, you're logging into your, for instance, your Google Apps for your company. You've already identified that, and so that SAML, that single sign-on across, can help identify you, and then you don't have to use a password for that system. And so in final, Johnny Appleseed, we all know him. He said, "Pray as you can, not as you can't." He also, in further manuscripts, also said, "And stop using passwords seriously." So take it from Johnny Appleseed. Be good advice. So that's the end of what I have. It's the end of passwords. They're on fire. Got to have a nice little animation at the end. Any questions, comments, opinions? Yeah.
Just real quick, Auth0.
Yes.
A little confusing with OI.
Yes, we do get that.
So, I just want to clarify that.
Mhm.
I had to stop and think that.
Yes. Yeah, we do get that.
So how, I want you to give a vendor pitch, like how does Auth0 relate to this stuff? I mean, because everyone knows this is the vendor pitching part, we know what you're about. I think it's good that there can be companies in this space. So.
Sure. So what we do is as a developer, instead of having to roll your own authentication, which here's now my pitch: don't roll your own authentication. Don't do it. Don't do it. If you need the proverbial nun slapping your hands on the keyboard whenever you think about rolling your own, think about that. Just don't roll your own. When you roll your own, you open up. This isn't your space. This isn't your skill. It isn't. It just isn't. It isn't your lane. Security is a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason, and it's much better to use a cloud provider or a provider of sorts that will handle that authentication for you instead of you doing it yourself and endangering. There was to branch off of that a little bit, there was a study done 3 years ago that said that for each hack that happened, each breach that happened, and users' information was stolen, on average, it cost a company in lost revenue and in help desk costs and in all of that, it ended up would cost them about $230 to $250 per user to deal with that breach, whether it be with fines or in just, I mentioned, the help desk costs and the management costs and all of that. So if you're a company that has 1,000, that's one thing, but we're talking about millions upon millions of users, that gets extremely costly. It's much easier to just use a system like ourselves who allow you to secure the connection, secure your users' information simply. For us, what we do is we allow, if you're gonna build something with a few lines of code, you sign on to our dashboard, you sign up, we give free account for developers to start out with. There's that spiel. But yeah, we do that. And then as you're signing in and creating your app and creating the client keys that you're going to need so you can put into your, to be able to call our APIs, You can identify if you want, with just a click of a button, what type of login. If you want to do social login options, you click a button and instantly on your app, when you reload, you'll now see the login, whichever ones you chose. It's that quick. As quick as it takes to come down through the interwebs, now your users can now start logging in with GitHub or Twitter or PayPal or Gmail or Facebook or any of those social logins, and you can even create your own custom login profiles as well.
Do you have support for those multi-factor tokens such as UBT?
Yes, so we actually are rolling out kind of a FIDO UBT solution, and we do work with WebAuthn as a solution right now. And then we're rolling out a number of new features to do with that. We do have MFA passwordless built into the system, which is just a matter of clicking a button, and now MFA is set up. You just have to put in your keys and such that you want to use. If you want to use our system, or if you want to use Twilio for sending the SMS, whatever, all of that's built in, all of that's ready to go. You click the button, and boom, now you're able to offer MFA to FA solutions as well. So and we can talk more about that as related to your specific system, but pretty much all of the major platforms, whether it be all the different monthly flavors of JavaScript to your age-old staples of .NET, even your securing back-end communication between machines, we can do all of that as well. So, all right, thank you.
Breaks, you can turn off recording and close the Zoom window.
Yeah, and stop.
There you go. Let you
There
do
it is.
that.
Yep.
I think doesn't want that to happen.